Hey guys, welcome back to Telltale. I'm Emily.
I'm Greg.
And today we are going to be going over the short story Tony and the Beetles by Philip K. Dick. So we're back into our Philip K. Dick series.
Yep.
And diving in head first.
Mm-hmm.
So, give us little details.
Well, first of all, this is the last Philip K. Dick story published in 1953.
Oh, finally!
We're finally through it. And it was published in the second issue of Orbit Science Fiction magazine, which...
What a fun illustration on the front. I like that.
Yeah, not for the Philip Dick story, but it is kind of a cool illustration. I don't know who did it. I don't recognize the style.
Yeah, nor do I.
But there weren't a whole lot of issues of this published. It didn't last very long. So it's one of the more minor science fiction magazines of the 50s. There were a lot of those that, came around for half a dozen or a dozen issues and then died.
Yeah.
And this is one of them. But they did publish some good fiction. August Derleth is in this issue. Mac Reynolds. John Christopher is in here. And, of course, Philip K. Dick. Mm-hmm. Oh, and Charles Beaumont is in here. He was a writer for the Twilight Zone.
Oh, okay. That name did sound familiar.
So it appeared in Orbit number 2, December of 1953, and is the 35th story on my bibliography for Philip K. Dick.
Was it only? I feel like we've already been through hundreds of his stories, and we still weren't out of 1953.
We're only up to number 35.
35. That's still a good number for that
quite
year,
a lot,
though.
Yes,
that's quite a bit.
Lot. When you figure we have done all of his fiction, there aren't any that we haven't been able to get a hold of. We've covered
so
it
far.
all. So that's 35 videos.
Yeah. That was a good chunk.
And so take the synopsis away.
All right. So Tony and his family live on, oh gosh, what planet was it? Was it Mars? Venus?
I don't remember.
I
I just wrote down alien planet. I thought it was some other solar system.
It could be. It may not have mentioned it that I recall, but I remember that they were on an alien planet, and it actually starts off with his father being very upset because they live amongst the race that the humans are fighting against. And of course the humans are fighting against them, looking for resources, as we do. So they live on a planet amongst others of these Beetles, as they call them, which is actually the racial slur for them. But they are an insect type, but sentient kind of creature. And in fact, they also are very strong in that they're telepathic. And they can read minds. So Tony is feeling some type of way about his father ranting about the humans starting to lose against the Beetles, and his father is being very overtly racist towards these beings, even though they live amongst them. And Tony has friends that are of this race. So as his dad is ranting, he's getting ready to head out into town to go hang out with his friends of this race. They're working on like a little, I guess, some kind of miniature of some kind or something that they were all trying to build together. So on his way into town, gets picked up by a trucker and starts kind of prodding the trucker about family members and what's going on in the fight against the humans and what's happening. And the trucker kind of is getting more and more agitated answering these kids' questions. Eventually the trucker just decides he's not going to take the kid any further, so kicks him out of the truck. It's actually a law at the time. If you see a human that needs a ride, you have to go pick them up. So he takes him as far as he feels like he can, drops him where he feels like he's done talking to the kid, and then the kid starts kind of a conversation with this female of the species, and she's just kind of basically lovingly trying to prod him into a direction of being like, you probably shouldn't be here. This is kind of a dangerous time for you to be here. And, people are gonna be really heated about it. Like, yeah, you've been here a long time, you were born here, but you're not from here.
Yeah.
So he finally gets to the point where he's at his friends, and his friends are acting really cold towards him. And he's like, what is happening? Yesterday we were all fine, and today everybody's acting like I'm some kind of major enemy. And his friends basically blow up and say, it's because you are. Like, now we're winning, and you're losing, and we don't want you here anymore.
Yeah.
Like, we just put up with you because we were scared to be racist against you, essentially. But now that we're winning, we feel emboldened to tell you to get out. We don't want your kind here anymore. And we don't like you stealing our resources and our jobs and all that other stuff. And so there ends up being a scuffle. The kid gets in a fight with his friends. Eventually he does have to be extracted, basically, from the situation by a police force of some kind.
Mm-hmm.
And then he goes home, and his family's sitting there and just kind of like, yeah, we shouldn't have let you go into town.
Yeah.
And he's like, Dad, what changed? And he's like, well, we were on top for a while, and so we could live here in peace with other people, and we're gonna lose. Like, from the way things look, we're actually gonna lose this war. And so we now have to be really careful and tread lightly, because we don't have the power we once had.
Right.
And that's basically the end of the story.
Mm-hmm.
Of them just kind of coming to terms with the fact that we might have to find a new home and get out of here.
Mm-hmm.
And that it's not looking good for us.
Yeah.
So, yeah. This was a really interesting story. Especially in light of gestures at everything politically happening in the United States right now.
Well, and everything that's happened in all the years since then.
Exactly.
You remember, this is 1953.
Yes.
You haven't been through all the civil rights movements yet.
No.
But, well,
it's getting there.
The closest parallel within Dick's lifetime, I think, would have been when we went to war with Japan,
Mm-hmm.
and we rounded up all the Japanese Americans and put them in internment camps,
Mm-hmm.
because we thought they were
Spies.
potentially spies or saboteurs.
Yeah. Terrorists of some kind.
Yeah, which
Mm-hmm.
which was not right for us to do that. But being in a war situation, you don't know who's
Mm-hmm.
the enemy. You don't know
Exactly.
who's in league with the people who attacked Pearl Harbor. You don't know who's going to be feeding information back.
Mm-hmm.
And so he lived through a time where he saw this happening to people in America.
Mm-hmm.
And he writes a story which very clearly makes a strong point of this being a bad thing. This telling you from the viewpoint of this kid who doesn't understand all this stuff, and just he has these friends, and all of a sudden one day
Everybody
his
turns
friends aren't
on.
his friends anymore, and he doesn't understand why.
Yeah, especially when he's lived there his whole life. He was born into this society. He wasn't brought there,
Right.
And in this I saw very much, like, I hate to make it is not, this of course being written when it is not a current events commentary, but it does draw a lot of parallels to what's happening now with citizens born in the United States as children, and their families being immigrants, and the issues of getting deported and all that stuff, and ICE agents going in illegally in some places to evict these people or to deport them. And so, like, the parallels were very, very striking, and I'm like, oh man, it develops such an interesting empathy for people who are going through that situation right now.
Yeah.
And it's really...
Yeah, but it's nothing new. I mean,
it isn't.
It's what the Japanese Americans went through. It's what the black people were fighting against during the 1960s with their riots and movements and marches and stuff. They were trying to fight against this idea that they should be seen as the enemy and seen as somebody to be feared, somebody to be hated. They were fighting against that hatred.
Yeah.
And, nothing has really changed. People are still assholes.
But it is, and it's still interesting that it's the people who are in power who feel like they are emboldened by that power. Mm-hmm. It's like, have you seen the hats that say "Make America, make a racists afraid again"? That look like the "Make America Great Again" hats.
Okay.
Like,
no,
I've seen those too, where it's like because of the how people feel emboldened by their administration or by certain ideals that they think are associated with their administration. They
Yeah.
feel then emboldened to start attacking minorities or people who are, part of that, technically the global majority. Because
Hmm.
white people, when you think in a global scale, are actually the minority.
Yeah.
We are the least of the population.
Yeah. We're just from Europe.
Yeah. So we're the global minority,
Hmm.
but in our country, the minorities end up being, unfortunately, black and brown people
Hmm.
and Hispanic people, Mexican people, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was just really interesting though to see it, because it's very much parallels something that is actively happening and very prominent in the news
sure.
right now. Because
Yeah.
as the time goes on, the news kind of stops tracking all that stuff.
Yeah.
Like when Black Lives Matter became a big phenomenon and there were protests and riots and things happening all over the place, it was back in the news. But even those were still going on, the news cut back on that because it was no longer something they could sensationalize.
I feel like it never does go away. I mean,
It really doesn't.
after 9/11, all the Muslims had to be afraid, because there was
It
racism
is far more
against
prominent.
them.
Yes, I would say that is correct.
There's always some group that's going through this that is the underdog and is being
Yeah.
stomped
During
on.
COVID, we were very anti-Asian,
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff. Yeah. And I would agree with that. I think for my generation, we kind of see that ebb and flow where it's kind of something always part of our culture, but it's not always prominent in the news until a lot more recently in the last few decades.
I think it depends on the group. It
Yeah.
seems to me there's always been some group that has been prominently crapped on by society.
Yeah, and I would agree that it probably has increased since 9/11 for sure. Because I do realize there's an influx. But again, I was so young and impressionable by that point. Maybe I just didn't notice until after
Yeah.
that. It could be any number of things.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the story definitely directly speaks to that kind of issue. And I think it's really interesting that it plays out the way it does.
Yeah, and like I say, that perspective of the child who doesn't understand what's going on entirely, doesn't understand why he can't be friends with his friends. Everything was okay before. Why are they not okay now? Just because it's something that's happening off planet.
Yeah, that he doesn't understand either. Like,
You
he
know,
understands
why
it in
should that change how
history.
his friends and him perceive each other?
Yeah, he understands it like from a book or historical perspective. He doesn't understand it from the emotional perspective.
But it's a good point. Just because there's some difference that's being called out, why should you stop seeing a person that you've always seen as a person suddenly no longer be a person? That's the root of the problem with racism.
Absolutely.
That because of some political change, all of a sudden this group
Yeah.
you can no longer associate with.
Yeah.
Well,
Why?
they were decent people yesterday. Why today are they not decent people? They're still the same people. They
Yeah.
still have the same thoughts, the same interests. You know, you should be able to still be friends with them.
Yes, and I like that it kind of brings up that concept of mob mentality, which can get very dangerous.
Yeah.
Where if you get enough people riled up in one isolated spot or get a group around a certain situation, it can escalate very quickly, as it did in this story. But I also think what's very interesting is that there's the female character that he encounters is the only one who seems to see him as human still.
Yeah.
But I would expect that to be a woman with a child, kind of understanding that maybe she has children of her own. We don't really know from the story, but understanding that, wow, this kid really has no idea how much danger he's in.
Yeah.
And her trying to be like very gentle and reminding him, like, I know it's hard to understand, but some stuff is going on that might change how you view your own society that you were born and raised in. And I just thought that was really loving and wonderful. I also found it very interesting because there are theories that a lot of people, when you talk about patriarchal culture versus matriarchal cultures, patriarchal culture will be very male-centric, whereas matriarchal cultures tend to be more child-centric. And making sure that you, like in her land, So I just thought it was kind of interesting to have that interaction with that female character and have her almost be the only one who perceives him as still a person.
Yeah.
And still having autonomy and still being worthy of respect and still, like, gently trying to offer him wisdom to keep him safe, even though it had nothing to do, she had no obligations to him, except that she recognized that this is a child who doesn't understand what's going on. So I thought that was also very thoughtfully done. But yeah.
So it was. I don't think it was quite a top tale.
I would agree.
As interesting a story and as important a subject as it is, I don't think it was. It was on par with his best work at this time.
Yes, and I do think it is a necessary story. I would recommend it to so many people.
Yeah.
It just doesn't hit as strongly as some of his other work. I felt like it was almost too simply written.
Yeah.
Versus some of the stuff has a lot more complex ways of probably displaying the same issue. And I feel like he could have done a better job with it. Like, I think he did well, but I think he could have done a better job with it and even expounded on it a little bit more. But I do understand that he probably wrote this with the desire to keep it brief.
Well, yeah.
For the medium. Story. Yeah, so he kind of was... His hands are a little tied by that. And I don't know, like, sometimes when you write to these things, they say you only have X amount of words you can take up, or max of X amount of words.
Yeah, or so many pages in the magazine that the editor needs to fill. And, I think, though, other works by Philip Dick, you know, just within this time period, the first year and a half of his career, we've seen him playing with shifting shifting perceptions of what's going on, and that's where he's his strongest. And you don't get that so much in this story. It's a little bit maybe, but not as strongly as he does in other stories. And so he's not really playing to his strengths in this.
No.
As good of a story it is, he's not really playing to his strengths with his stories.
But I think it's a point he really desired to make, and good for him for making it, because it's necessary.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would agree. I don't think this is something that's very strong. There was no twist. He usually has a really nice twist. But yeah, it's just very thoughtfully done. So it's not something, it's not like I wouldn't recommend it to people, but I like the extremes it takes.
Yeah.
And I like that it simplifies
And I like
things.
the risk of the statement of this sort in 1953.
Very necessary.
I mean, what was going on? The Korean War. We were up against the Koreans and seeing Koreans and communists as being these evil things, and trying to put them down and coming up with all kinds of
and dehumanizing them a lot.
The House Committee on Un-American Activities, or whatever that was called.
Yeah.
You know, and seeking out people.
The Red List.
Yeah. To basically destroy their lives by calling them communists, whether they were or not.
Yeah, including some really prominent people. Like Lucille Ball was on there and had to go in front of a judge and talk about how she's not
hair.
And a comedian.
Yeah.
You can't be funny in democracy.
Yeah.
I guess. But yeah, it's just so interesting to see that perspective, especially in that time frame. I agree with that as well.
Yeah.
And it's necessary, and it's still necessary. I wish it wasn't. I wish we could say we're over this by now.
Yeah,
but
I'm still waiting to see people actually grow up a little bit, and it's not happening.
No, unfortunately. There's just a lot of people who are really dedicated to protecting their own ignorance, I'm finding. And that's very frustrating.
Yeah.
To watch as a person who wants to always be in a constant state of expanding my mind and growing and learning and making sure that I have good values despite what my culture around me is doing. And it's frustrating. It's frustrating to be a good person, watch other people not be good people, and just be so hateful. I don't understand it at all. So, but I feel very much in his position as a child. Like,
oh yeah.
Even though I'm 30-something years old, it feels like you're kind of a kid again, wondering, why the hell is this even happening? It doesn't make sense logically. So, it's very frustrating.
Yeah. So, have you ever read Tony and the Beatles? It's definitely not one of Philip Dick's most famous stories. And of course, a lot of people are going to hear that name and think, oh, this must be late 60s and about rock music, right? No, it has nothing to do with any of that. But yeah, the name does sound
Yeah.
like Alvin and the Chipmunks,
Yeah.
and something like that.
Marina and the Diamonds.
Yeah.
Billy and the Jets.
But if you've read this story by any chance and have some thoughts on it, please leave your thoughts in the comment section of the video and join us for the next Philip K. Dick we do. It will be number 36, titled Beyond the Door, and will be the first one from 1954.
Finally.
Yes.
So thanks, guys, for joining us. Like and subscribe, and we will see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.